Mycoplasma is a bacteria, but it's a bacteria without a cell wall, so it's a very primitive bacteria. It's lost a lot of its genetic information, so it has to depend upon the host to survive and grow. Mycoplasma is a bacteria, but it's a bacteria without a cell wall, so it's a very primitive bacteria. It's lost a lot of its genetic information, so it has to depend upon the host to survive and grow. These are all naturally occurring organisms. In some cases, they've been modified by the techniques of genetic engineering for different uses. One of the uses has been to make a non-lethal biological warfare agent. Well, I think it's turned out to be an attack on our health because biologic agents are not controllable. And so whenever they're used in experiments, for example, or human protocols in any way, they can get loose and have gotten loose over the years and spread into the human population. This is a fact. You just cannot control biologic agents. So I think in these cases there were mistakes that were made. They got loose, they get loose naturally, and they penetrate into the population. The real problem here is that they're continuing to penetrate deeper and deeper into the population because people, physicians, scientists, and so on don't recognize the danger of these pathogenic agents. HIV/AIDS, the HIV virus doesn't really kill people. It has to have a cofactor, and the mycoplasma is thought to be one of the cofactor organisms that goes along with HIV virus, and that really causes the real pathogenic event, not the HIV virus, because reducing the CD4 levels doesn't really kill anyone. But these opportunistic infections or purposeful infections do. So in that regard, I think it's imperative that we not only find these infections where they occur, but they need to be appropriately treated. We do know that the pharmaceutical companies depend upon a lot of their profits for drugs and so on to treat chronic illnesses. And these are patients that they think they're going to have for the rest of their lives. So it's a big profit center for them. So they've kind of moved into the area of chronic illnesses in general. They don't really like solutions to these illnesses because it cuts into their profits, long-term profits. So in that regard, they have not been our best friends. Now, whether there's collusion between industry and government, we really don't know. We know that industry was involved in some cases in the development of biological warfare agents, for example, in their testing. But that's sort of out of my realm. We see what happens in the end result, the patients that come down with these different diseases and so on of unknown origin. And we have to deal with those problems, and that's what we do primarily. There's kind of an incestuous relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry as a whole. The medical industry is dependent upon the pharmaceutical industry to support research, for example, clinical trials and so on. On the other hand, the medical industry is quick to use pharmaceuticals to solve some of the problems just because it seems like a quick fix. There's also a lot of marketing going on, marketing to physicians, for example, to employ certain pharmaceuticals in the treatment of certain illnesses and so on. Even though they might be of questionable value, for example, in terms of treatment. So you might think that there's, a conflict of interest here at a minimum. But these relationships have kind of ingrained in Western medicine between the pharmaceutical companies and the physicians that treat patients. So it's kind of hard to counter that, break that stranglehold, more or less, on the medical community that is apparent in terms of the drug manufacturers and their influence on them. What we've found over the years is the best place for patients, because I assume you're talking about patients, getting information about physicians and healthcare workers in general, is to go to patient support groups. These are groups that collectively get together, and they often know the right and the wrong physicians to go to in a general area. So your local support group is often the best source of information about local physicians. And I think this is really what people need to know. Always hope for anybody that is chronically ill, and there are a number of reasons for their chronic illness, and they have to find different physicians, for example, that can sort through these problems. So they need to seek out medical care that is broad-based, that is not simply using traditional medicine, but also uses untraditional medicine, because often this gives tremendous relief to patients. It may not cure them, but it gives them relief. And we've tried to take a very open-minded view of this whole problem. And so we recommend on our website, for example, a lot of non-traditional treatments, either considered naturopathic treatments, for example, or supplements, for example, to treat illness. It's not a panacea, but it does help patients. But overall, it really requires kind of a comprehensive, holistic approach to treat these chronic illnesses. It can't just be done simply by going to your GP, for example, or going to your holistic practitioner as well. So it requires a little bit of push and pull between the traditional and the non-traditional approaches. And every patient's different, and each patient requires a lot of personal attention and care. People, for example, that come to us have been to the average of over 20 different physicians and have found no relief whatsoever, and they're just desperate to find anything that will help them. And we give them some clues, and our website gives information to patients on what they can do and for themselves, to help themselves. And a lot of it depends upon some very fundamental issues. We start with diet, modification of diet. We go from there to supplements, and from there to more traditional Western type medicine, pharmaceutical medicines that are useful, not those that are just palliative, but those that are actually useful in really eliminating the disease process. And it seems to require that type of holistic approach. I think in terms of the Codex problem that you mentioned, it's all about money. The large pharmaceutical companies would like to control the whole vitamin and supplement industry because they see that as a threat to their future profits, or they see that as a profit center that they would like to acquire as one of their own profit centers. So one way that they have influence the government, so they can seek to control that through governmental regulations, to force us to go to them to get our supplements and vitamins and so on. So I'm absolutely dead against that, because I just don't think the major pharmaceutical companies are friends to patients that have these illnesses. I'm mostly directing my comments to the higher levels at the pharmaceutical companies. And most of these large multinational corporations have been taken over by the bean counters. And so these are the bottom line people that are worried about profits. And in the old days, there actually used to be scientists and physicians who used to be in command of these large pharmaceutical companies, and that's no more. So if anything, I think we need to have a little bit of readjustment there. We need to have a little bit of balance in these pharmaceutical companies, so they're not just interested in the bottom line, that they're interested more in the overall health of their constituents. They've been modified by the techniques of genetic engineering for different uses. One of the uses has been to make a non-lethal biological warfare agent. It's turned out to be an attack on our health because biologic agents are not controllable. And so whenever they're used in experiments, for example, or human protocols in any way, they can get loose and have gotten loose over the years and spread into the human population. This is a fact. You just cannot control biologic agents. So I think in these cases there were mistakes that were made. They got loose, they get loose naturally, and they penetrate into the population. The real problem here is that they're continuing to penetrate deeper and deeper into the population because people, physicians, scientists, and so on don't recognize the danger of these pathogenic agents.